I want to show you how to do simple lettering with Photoshop. There will be more to come, but I want to have you see a first round of it so that you can understand where we go when we have lettering. I'm going to go up to Photoshop File and say New. And it's going to give me the ability to make a new white piece of paper or document. So far it doesn't have a name. It opens up in pixels. I want to see it in inches. So I click on this up and down arrow thing and it puts it in inches, both the height and the width. Now the width is at 7 or 6 something. I'm going to put it at 7, and the height just comes along with it. I could make the height maybe, oh, let's go 5, being a ratio. They aren't joined together in this case. There's no linking device here, so you can say whatever you want. I'm going to go to resolution very high, 400 pixels per inch. It's an RGB color, that's fine, 8-bit, and it's a white background. It doesn't have a name now, but I can give it a name when I get ready to save it. But so I'll just say OK. And there's that new page, that new document. You can see up here across the top, it's still there as a tab, but it doesn't have a name yet. Now, the text tools, there's things to look at here. The T tool here, the texting tool, and there are several other choices to be made here. I can get it to open. It's the horizontal, the vertical, which you don't use very much, the outline mask, which I don't use hardly at all, or this vertical outline mask I don't use hardly at all anyway. So let's just stay with the regular text. All the effects you can make happen as you need them. Over here, of the 3 palettes I have, here's character and paragraph. Paragraph is centered at the moment. I can make it flush left or flush right. Let's stay with it at flush left. Now, character is the fonts or the types. It tells you what I'm in here. I'm in what's now called impact. And if I click on this little down arrow, it will show me all the fonts that are installed in my machine. Now, my computer probably has a little more fonts than yours does, unless you've been adding to them. Fonts have to be added. When you open Photoshop, it comes with a basic set of fonts, but you can go different sources and purchase or get other additional fonts. I'm not going to go through the hundreds that there are, but there are different fonts that are either serif or sans serif or script or calligraphy, whatever suits you. You can see that I'm in impact right here, and it actually gives you a little sample what that font looks like in the word sample. I'm going to stay with impact, and you see it's here. It also says regular. Now, it comes only as regular, but some fonts, when you click on this, it shows you thin or medium or heavy or black, so that you have a variety to choose from depending on your needs. Also, this first box here says that it's going to be 48 points high. That's how we measure type, not in inches or feet, it's points. And it's like a pinpoint in a piece of paper. So 48 points is 48 pinpoints high. That's fairly medium size. If I go here, you can see 6 points you can hardly read. 10 and then 12 points is what your magazines and newspapers are set in. And as you get higher, 72 points happens to be 1 inch high. So if I stay at 48, that's fairly large. This box right here is the different space between the fonts. The bottom of, I mean not the fonts, between the lines. Between the bottom of the first line and the second line is so many points. That was at 44. I'm going to go there to 48 as well. It should be something about the similar size that you are dealing with, especially if you're going to have hanging down Y's and going up H's. And then there are other things here that we'll talk about as we need to. But I've selected a font and its size. I seldom have hit the return key in Photoshop to have 2 or 3 or 4 lines of type. Type is generally done in another program and then placed into Photoshop, but sometimes you want your own headline. So with that, I can come over here. Remember, I had my paragraph, or my type is going to be flush left and ragged right, or centered, or flush right, ragged left. I'm going to go with that. And when I click here in the type, then I get a blinking cursor that is 48 points high. Now, I can say on my keyboard, I'll put down my caps locks. Now they're all going to be caps. Okay, so I can put up the classic end of the movie, the end. Now, if I click here, I get the bounding box around it. I can manually enlarge this by holding down the shift key. It will manually, well, grabbing the corner here, I can manually enlarge it. If you look over here in character, it is actually enlarged to 81.85 points. So I've done that by manual, or I could come back here to, and I'm going to say my arrow says I want you to apply that because I've enlarged something, so I have to say yes, I want that to happen. Or it's still selected, well, I can select it by taking the text tool and going click, 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 and that no, it's really selected. And I can come back over here and say, let's go back to the 72 points, and there it is. So you can manage that depending on where you want to put it. If I wanted this directly in the center of this window, I'm going to go to my ruler, and I'm going to drag out the ruler on the side of the ruler. Isn't there? Hit Command R, and I'm going to go. Remember, this was 7, so I'm going to go at 3.5. So there it is, and look at the bounding box. It is right in the middle. If this was moved over here a little bit, and I wanted to center it, I can come back and work it until that center line. Now here I use my arrow key on the keyboard. I can put it over there, and there it is. Now that's all caps. Impact is the font. It's a very sans serif, very straight up and down font, and you'll deal with what font you want based on what your subject is, what you're trying to do. There's all kinds of reasons you choose a font. I can leave it at that. I can change the color. Notice it was a light blue or darker blue here in my color box. If I come back here again and say click, click, click with the type tool, that selects the whole thing. That's what's called a backlight. And I come over here and select my color. Let's say I wanted a reddish orange. And so I can come down here in the orangey area here and finally select a solid color instead of a white or a black, and then in the orangey red, and select that. And because it's already selected as it comes into the foreground here, when I click away from the type with now it's an orange type. So that's how you can change colors. There's an infinite amount of things you can do to a font to make it interesting. Photoshop isn't exactly the best place to do a lot of type because that's what other programs are set up for, but you can do a headline and add stuff to it. Let's say we wanted a second line to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my arrow and deselect that. You see the end is, it says it's typed because I made it type, so right over here in this layer there's a T there. And it says the end. It tells me what I did in caps. Now I can change that so it still has lettering, but it doesn't have the type. With type thing, I can still check the spelling up here in edit. I can come down here and say check spelling, and it'll say you don't need to do anything. Everything's spelled right according to what they're talking about. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind. If you change it out of type, you lose some of its ability to edit itself. Now, I want to get another layer down here, so I'm going to hit the new layer button, and there's layer 2, and I can take my my text, and I'll come here and I'll just click on it. I'm going to change it from 42 down to maybe 24 points, and I'll change the color too. I'll go from orange to a medium blue. Now, the second line is going to be smaller. Let's see, let's come again with all caps. Okay, so I have a secondary line. Now you see, here's the center of that because it started wherever I clicked it from here going left. If I said center, it would have come from the center out, but I'll just move that and I'll use my arrow key and I'll bring it over and say, there it is, there. Okay, so that's my second line. See, it's up here. In the layers, it says only when that, or you can move them around and put one above the other, back and forth. Doesn't matter a lot. You can change the background color, but that's how you're going to work with type. One other thing you can do to make it a little more exciting, if I go back to the end, and it's selected, see down here in the bottom of the layers box, there's a little FX, that's for filters. If I click on that and hold it down, my first choice is a drop shadow. And when the drop shadow opens, it comes open in a black color. And this angle here, I can have it come from down from the upper right or upper left, or I can make it come from the bottom up. So you can play with that. You can also set the distance, how far away that shadow is going to be. You don't want to overdo this. The spread is getting a little more fuzzier, as is the size. It really narrows or fuzzes up the edge, so it gives you almost a hard to look at. So you can decide where you're going to go with that. If you don't like black, you can click on the back and say, I want that to be a very dark blue, or whatever color is behind that, and you can change the color of your shadow. Against the black background here, I could say, let's just go with gray. It's going to be kind of gray anyway, but it depends on how subtle you want to be. So one other filter you might want to try, you can try all of these out, but one of the other ones is Bevel and Emboss, which right now it's a flat edge letter. If I put Bevel and Emboss, I can say I want the light, again, the source is coming from here, and I can come from the upper left down to lower right, or whatever works as far as you're going to say where my light's coming from. The white and black are the highlights and the shadows. I'm going to go to that white and go down into the red oranges and pick a really pale red orange, and that becomes my highlight. And the dark black, I'm also going to say I'm going back into the reddish browns and get a brownish, so it's not quite so harsh. Now there's my two colors, and the size here, then I can say how much bevel I want. And you want to overdo it, or sometimes you overdo it, it's kind of interesting too. It just gives you an interesting fact. But here you got some shadow and some highlight. And so I like what I'm doing here, and you can play with some of these things, sliders. And I say, okay, and now I have, if I click away on some other tool, I don't have the bounding box. But that gives me then an introduction to what lettering is going to be with some filters and some things added that we'll see on down the road.